Some things in life are just worth waiting for. The turkey during Thanksgiving dinner, a fireworks show on the 4th of July, or even a present under the Christmas tree. But for me, that wait lasted 2.5 years. I had it all planned out, the spots, the shots, even the hotel. But the scourge of COVID-19 put a swift stop to my long-awaited Pennsylvania trip. 3 years later, to the day, Boston by Rails is proud to present an adventure that may have been delayed, but was well worth the wait. Welcome to Pennsylvania. Throttle up and clear for takeoff. 2.5 years behind schedule, but better late than never. I'm heading to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania today to start off my 3-day rail fanning adventure alongside Boston by Rail's regular Isaiah. But little did I know that upon touchdown I would face flat tires, coal mine fires, and lots of trains. After being picked up at the airport, we arrived at our first spot, Eaton Park. Eaton Park is the IHOP of the Alleghenies, and it provided us with some much-needed nourishment after a day of travel. Just behind Eaton Park is a field with a fantastic view of the Norfolk Southern Fort Wayne line. And we weren't the only ones rail fanning. After all, Pittsburgh is a hot spot. There is nothing better than good food and a good train. Our excitement was definitely showing, so we then headed to our next spot, Hayesville. Hayesville was the first spot I ever discovered when I began researching for this trip, so let's just say that this train was extra special. After watching this intermodal pass, we sought out shade at the Emsworth dams and locks. The locks were built in 1921 in order to control the level of the Ohio River and allow for the safe passage of boats. The lock system is certainly a remnant of Pittsburgh's industrial past, and these remnants are everywhere you look. Less than 100 years ago, Pittsburgh was the steel capital of the world. Producing 60% of United States steel, Pittsburgh was truly a steel city. As was often the case with cities swept up in the Industrial Revolution, the rights of laborers was a topic of great dispute, and nowhere more than in neighboring Homestead, Pennsylvania. The Homestead strike was a major strike and clash between the Carnegie Steel Company and its workers. It was a hallmark moment in American labor history. These days, Pittsburgh produces its steel a little bit more subtly. CSX runs coke trains frequently on the Pittsburgh subdivision, coke being a vital ingredient for making steel. You can even see coke barges traveling up and down the Ohio River. And that brings us back to Emsworth. Here at the locks, there are more remains of what Pittsburgh once was. In between the two tracks is the remaining evidence of the Pennsylvania Railroad's old Emsworth station. Though the canopy and classic station decor has vanished, the platform still remains as a fantastic place to film trains. A Additionally, lying just before the tracks is a tunnel that allows for dam workers to access the site when a train is blocking the road. And I can see why they have this, because there are a lot of trains. With word of a dead period quickly circulating Facebook, we sought out our Plan B, Conway Yard. Located in Conway, Pennsylvania, Conway Yard is used as a transfer point for much of Norfolk Southern's east-west mixed freight traffic through Pennsylvania. The yard is big. In fact, from 1956 to 1980, it was considered to be the biggest hump yard in the world. I'll get back to what a hump yard is later. Currently, we are set up on a public bridge with a fantastic view of the yard movements. And would you look at that? There's a train. This seems to be the power for some eastbound train. I'm not quite sure what. But I do know that right now they have received permission to proceed west back into Conway Yard. To the east, we see 11K tied down at the East Conway signals. This is the same train that we saw at the Eaton Park, but it sure isn't going as fast as it once was. We then drove by the rest of Conway Yard, and it sure was interesting. See for yourself. The locomotive you just saw, NS 5244, is classified as one of Norfolk Southern's high-hood GP38-2 locomotives. It began its life out on the Southern Railway, and now operates as a yard switcher. Though these locomotives once led daily mainline freights or locals, they now are limited to yard duties and are quite rare. After the high hood, we passed the power for Norfolk Southern's 17N, and boy is it interesting. I wonder if we will see it later on. Continuing our voyage west, we headed to the best place to view the western movements of Conway Yard, next to the old bowling alley in Rochester. Beaver Valley Bowl, once the Beaver Valley Brewing Company, has been entertaining the people of Rochester since 1950, but recently it closed its doors. However, it is a great place for trains to change their crews, as is the case with this Norfolk Southern manifest. We just barely caught them before they pulled out of the yard. And here in Rochester, trains really have a habit of sneaking up on you. Railfanning requires a lot of waiting, so to pass the time in between trains, we explored the area around the tracks. The area plays host to an assortment of boating docks, as well as a lot of rigged industry. There's even a massive steel trestle. How fitting for it to be here in Metro Pittsburgh. But it wasn't long until we heard the train of the day, 17N, ask the West Conway dispatcher for permission out of the yard. Now, let's take a closer look at that lash-up. The Canadian National 2507, trailing second, classifies as a C44-9WL. This locomotive is a -9 locomotive with a wide cab. Better known as comfort cabs, these types of locomotives are built with special reinforced noses. Specifically, the Canadian comfort cab is more spacious for the crews and is equipped with electrically heated windows to keep the crews warm in the harsh Canadian winters. Trailing 3 and 4 is a Norfolk Southern slug set. Yard slugs are remote-controlled locomotives that do majority of the yard switching in big freight yards, like Conway Yard. V12 Productions on YouTube has a great video explaining slug sets, so check that out in the top right corner. Here, the slug sets spend much of their time working the hump yard at Conway. A hump is a human-made hill that allows for easier switching operations. Slugs push cars up and down the hump and use gravity to send the cars to their various tracks. Though out of date, many yards still utilize the technology today. Back in Rochester, we see Norfolk Southern 25Z pass by, the same exact train which we saw in Hayesville. They stopped beside the first train we saw here, waiting for a signal west. While waiting for said signal indication, 25Z asked the dispatcher what was holding them up.
25Z dispatcher. Go ahead, over. That's whatever we're waiting on here, bud.
20W coming through bright, C51 behind him, and then a 66.6.
Wow. Okay.
Yep.
It's quite funny listening to crews and dispatchers talk over the radio, but what we heard was good news for us rail fans and bad news for the train crews. There will be lots of waiting ahead for that crew, because there's an eastbound parade approaching. As you heard, the first train to clear would be Norfolk Southern 20W, eastbound stacks from Chicago to Croxton, New Jersey. Check out that Kansas City Southern Power trailing. And don't worry, we will see this train much more in the future. Next lined into Conway was Norfolk Southern C51, a local with an SD40E leading 3 other EMD locomotives. Directly following C51 was NS62V, an empty trash train bound for Oak Island, New Jersey. Then, a westbound intermodal quickly interrupted the eastbound parade. Suddenly, while the intermodal was passing, the sky began to rumble, and 2 F-22 fighter jets began piercing overhead. What perfect timing! The third train in the parade, a high-priority intermodal, was next through Rochester. As we pulled out from Rochester, a grain train caught us completely by surprise. Is it me, or are grain trains the loudest trains out there? Wow. Driving back home, we passed an assortment of trains on the way. Intermodals. Intermodals. And more intermodals. But after getting a glimpse of a fast-moving eastbound, we pulled back over at Hayesville for one final train. And would you look at that? It's our old friend, 20W. As the train was consumed by a golden Pennsylvania sunset, I reminisced on a day devoted entirely to steel and wheel. Can it get much better than that? Well, I soon found out that it could. Tune in to episode 2, where my brother and I visit the world-famous Horseshoe Curve in Altoona, Pennsylvania, as well as the many spots that surround it, but not without a few bumps in the road.